Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the ego in regards to manifesting. So, I don't know about you, but the first thing that I think of when I think of the ego is just like someone trying really, really hard to, look good, to gather people's attention, to basically be validated. I feel like that is like the number one thing with the ego is that it wants to be validated, and we can see that in all forms. Like when we talk about someone having a big ego, it usually means that they care a lot about their appearance, they care a lot about what other people say, what they think of them, and the same goes when you're manifesting things. So the ego is always looking for validation, and we have to understand this because when it comes to manifesting, the biggest thing is that the ego is always going to want to look for proof. It's always going to want to look for validation that what it's doing is working, or else it's going to start telling you that, okay, what we're doing right now is a waste of time. I think we should stop doing it because I'm not seeing anything. That is what the ego is going to keep telling you. The ego is always going to tell you that because the ego, no matter what, is going to look for proof. It's going to look for validation. That's just really what it's designed to do. That's what the ego does. So first off, realize that if you're always looking for, proof in the 3D and you're trying not to, you're trying to ignore it and you're having difficulty, realize that it's not you that's doing that. Like, you're literally wired to do that, so don't ever feel bad. We all do it. It happens to the best of us, but this is why a lot of spiritual teachers will spend a lot of time trying to dissolve the ego, and this can be called something like non-duality, and I will probably get more into that in different videos like later on. But in terms of dissolving the ego and getting more into your higher self, which really is just being more aware and realizing that you aren't your thoughts, you're not your feelings, you are really just the awareness of those things. And I don't know where I was going with this. I'm trying to say, so in terms of your thoughts and your feelings, all the time, like we hear, you aren't your thoughts, you aren't your feelings, you are the one that's observing them, right? You might have heard this before, you might hear this in terms of non-duality if you've heard about that. But the thing is, we have to realize is that we are technically still everything. Like everything we see, all that exists is us, right? So we technically are our thoughts, we are our feelings, but what's really interesting is that they are not who we are though. They may be a small, little, teeny tiny portion of us, but they aren't who we are and they don't define us, because we could feel any feeling, we could think any thought. It doesn't matter because we are everything, right? So the feeling or thought that you have at a specific time, it doesn't have to define you as who you are, because you are the whole of it. You are everything. You're every thought, every feeling that could ever be felt. So when you have specific thoughts sometimes that are negative or something, realize that yes, those are a part of you, but you also are every single positive thought out there. So you could always choose a positive thought rather than a negative thought, right? And the other thing with the ego too is that it really makes you feel bad too if you ignore it. Like if you try to ignore the ego or you try to resist it, it will only get louder and more annoying. So if you've ever tried to just like ignore negative feelings, you've tried to just be so positive that day even though you're feeling really down, then it's just going to get louder and it's just going to worse, right? I'm sure you've noticed that at times. Like you're trying so hard to be positive and it's not working. Like all these negative thoughts just keep coming up, or you get this anxious feeling that won't go away. And this is because the ego, it likes attention. It wants attention. That's really what it wants. But we have to think of the ego as is like this annoying little person in your head. Think of it like, this is how I like to think of it, is like someone who's just like really annoying, kind of like a sibling. If any of you have siblings here who were annoying growing up or something, if you had a sibling like that, I definitely did, who just wanted to get in your face all the time and bother you and like say things that you know aren't true, but they would just say it to get in your head, or even just like a mean friend or something. You can compare it to that, but someone like that, that's how you have to think of your ego. It wants to get in your face. It wants you to listen to it. It's like a little nagging person that wants all of your attention. And when you don't give it that, it's going to get louder and more angry and it's going to get more annoying. But the truth is, if you think about it, just like a person, if you start to ignore them, eventually it will go away. Eventually it will die down. It will get tired of trying to pull you back all the time. and it does die down. And I've done this, I've seen this. This is what non-duality is about. It's really just not letting the thoughts affect you, realizing that these thoughts are not the thoughts that you have to attach yourself to. Like if you're having negative thoughts or negative feelings coming up, you can just sort of, it's hard to explain, but instead of really just trying so hard to think positive thoughts instead of the negative thoughts, what you really need to do is just sort of look at the ego in its face and just be like, all right, I allow this to be here. I allow these thoughts, whatever, but that's it. Like you allow it. You recognize that it's there and say, okay, yep, I see you, but you're not going to do anything about it. You just sort of kind of have to look at it and just like have a blank face. Like if you think about how you would react to a person who's in your face, who's like this, who's annoying you, like sometimes you just want to be like just stare at them like blankly. That's kind of how you have to be with your ego, is sort of look directly at it, shine a spotlight on it, kind of like Eckhart Tolle talks about. You want to just sort of become aware of it, acknowledge that it's there, acknowledge that you allow these negative feelings, you allow the negative thoughts, because if you're trying to resist them, then the ego is just going to try and fight harder. So just be like, yep, that's cool. Kind of like, in a fight or argument where you just say yes to someone. Like if they're insulting you or something, they'd say like, I think your outfit looks really stupid today, and be like, oh, thank you. So when you respond to someone who is coming after you and you just give them that sort of dull response that they're not really looking for, where you don't react, what happens is you're saying something in response to it, but you're not giving it really what it wants, which is it wants you to fuel itself. It wants you to keep fueling the negative thoughts. It wants you to think more negative thoughts. The ego wants you to fuel the negative thoughts. It wants you to think more of them, and it's basically adding like logs to a fire. The more that you fight the ego, the more that you say things to sort of combat it, just like in an argument, when you try to argue with someone to get your point across, it's never going to work. And you can see this in the physical world too. The physical world is just a mirror of the ego. You can see it when people get in these huge fights and they try to get their point across and no one wants to agree. It never works out. And the only time that the fight dies down is when the two people walk apart and they go chill somewhere else and they don't talk anymore, or one person's just like, okay, yep, I'm done, and just walks away. That's the only way that it'll ever end. So when you're having these negative thoughts in your head and it's not going well, you really just need to look at the ego, just be like, all right, yep, okay, I heard you, and then that's it. Move on. Like from there, what you want to do is anytime you start getting more and more of these negative thoughts, you just don't do anything about them. Like you just allow them to be there. Like just don't even try to think of a positive thought to combat it, unless you are in a state where you feel you can do that. Because sometimes, if you just have one little negative thought that's nothing too big, you can just think of a positive thought and you can go about your day. That's fine. You can totally do that. You can flip thoughts. But if you're in that state where it's getting worse and every time you try to think something positive, you just think more negative, don't try to fight it. Stop fighting it. Look directly at it. Be like, all right, this is how I'm feeling right now, or this is what I'm thinking right now, and that's whatever, okay? Just acknowledge it, and then from there, once you've acknowledged it, you just simply, it's basically like ignoring your thoughts, but you're not doing it in a way that's very active. It's really just about observing your thoughts. This is where the whole idea of detaching from your thoughts comes in, because people talk about it like, you're looking at your thoughts as like clouds coming in one window and then going out the other window. You sort of let them drift by. So if the ego continues to spit out negative thoughts as you are trying to, just be calm and just ignore it at this point, you just sort of have to observe the thoughts. Like if they're there, you don't have to give them any attention really if you don't want to, but really it's just about going about your day, doing what you got to do. Let the negative thoughts be there, let them pass through. Don't give them any attention though, that's the thing. Don't try to fight them, allow them. Okay, the video sort of cut off there, but what I also want to say, if you hear anything too, my cat's now on her crunchy mat. It's like a noise mat, whatever. Anyways, in terms of the negative thoughts coming up and, like I said, just going about your day, the other thing you also want to recognize is that it's okay to have negative thoughts. It's okay for them to come up. It's okay to have negative feelings, because that's like a human experience. That is okay to have those things. They will always be there. You're never going to completely get rid of the ego, no matter how aware you are, No matter how much you try, the ego is always going to be there. So you kind of have to learn to work with it. So that is why, excuse me. So that is why when negative thoughts come up, you don't really react to them. Allow them to be there. Don't freak out, like, oh my God, I'm starting to think negative. Oh my God, oh my God. Like, no, just be like, all right, I acknowledge this. This is what's happening right now. That's fine. And what you want to do is just give the least energy you can to these negative thoughts. As much as you can, allow them to be there, but realize that you don't have to attach any meaning to these thoughts either. If you start feeling negative and you start thinking negative, don't attach a meaning to it as in, oh my God, I'm off track. I should be thinking positive right now. Oh my God, why am I thinking negative? I was doing so well. Don't do that. Don't attach a meaning to it, because the thoughts are naturally arising. It is not a bad thing to sometimes have negative thoughts or negative feelings. There are always going to be days where this happens, and the fastest way to move through them is to just recognize that it's okay. And just like accepting that. Like really it's about acceptance. About accepting that you have negative thoughts right now and that's okay. That's fine. But you don't listen to the negative thoughts. Whatever they're saying to you, just allow it to be there, but don't let it bring you down. Don't let the negative thoughts or negative feelings cause you to think you're doing something wrong. Because the ego will try so hard to convince you of that. It will try so hard to tell you that because you're thinking this way, you're doing something wrong. You must be doing something wrong. You're not doing anything right because you're thinking negatively right now. Why aren't you thinking positively? Like, don't listen to that. Just allow it to be there. Just be like, this is fine. I'm allowed to think negative sometimes. That's okay. And also, say to yourself, this does not knock me off track. It doesn't mean I'm off track if I'm thinking negative thoughts. It doesn't mean anything if you don't give it meaning. Because all things in this life are just the meanings that we give them. So if you attach a positive to a negative situation or a negative feeling, then you're going to see more positive things out of that. That's why people say, like, affirm when you're angry or do things like that, because really it's just about how you're looking at the situation. So in regards to the ego, it really is, its whole goal too is to keep you in the illusion, right? I like to think of the ego kind of like if we were the universe, which we're the universe creating this reality for ourselves that we want to make it immersive, we want to make it feel like we don't know what's going to happen next and like kind of keep ourselves locked in this, then the ego would make sense to create because it keeps the illusion real, because the only thing stopping you from your desires really is the ego. It really is just these thoughts in your head that you don't have something. That's what the ego is for. It like really keeps us in the illusion. So recognize that anytime the ego says something negative or something about you that makes you feel bad and then you start thinking that's the truth, realize that it's trying to keep you in the illusion. That's its job. That's what it's meant to do. So start looking at it like an annoying little person in your head that just wants to annoy you, that just wants your attention, and that just wants to keep you fooled, basically. It wants to keep you thinking that you don't have everything. It wants you to believe that you don't have your desire right now. Because, like I said, the ego's number one thing that it wants is validation and proof. So if you don't have that to offer your ego, it's going to try and fight you on it every step of the way, because it's trying to keep you in this illusion where you think that you have to work to get things, or you think that you don't have everything yet, or you have to do something specific to get something else. That's what the ego wants you to believe. But if you start to realize that, and you start to realize that the ego is really just this little obnoxious thing in your head that tries to get you to believe in its lies, then you start to not take it so seriously anymore. Like if you really start looking at it that way, the ego it's not telling the truth ever. It just lies. Like, it really just lies. I almost titled this video, Your Ego is the Devil, because it's kind of the truth. And all the times that people have had really negative thoughts or life's gone really negatively, like, it's always the ego that brings you down, or that, causes negative thoughts. And, if you think about, like, in history where you talk about, like, exorcists and things like that, like exorcism, the ego is, like, the creator of like all negative things basically that happen. So I don't know, I used to look at it like that, like the ego is just all things negative, and that's why I won't listen to it, because I know that it's not truly who I am, and I know that it really is just wanting to keep us locked in of where we are right now. It wants us to keep us thinking that this is all real and that this is all there is. That's what the ego wants you to think. So anytime you think otherwise and then you think you're being silly for believing and manifesting and maybe it's all made up, that's the ego trying to keep you locked in the illusion. Recognize that. And the ego, though, at the same time, so there is a way, obviously, to dissolve the ego, and that is to become very highly aware of your thoughts and to basically, I would say, ignore the ego to a certain extent. You ignore the ego until it goes away. It does at some point. I've had this happen numerous times. If you ignore it for long enough, if you just don't give it any attention at all, you don't say anything back to it, you just completely, I basically just go about my day. I do all the things I'm going to do. I try to keep active, because if you're busy, your mind's not thinking so much, and eventually it becomes very quiet in your mind, and it's very beautiful. I've been there a few times where it's been so quiet, and just everything feels so much easier. I feel so much more in alignment with myself, but at the same time, if we want to live in this world, you kind of need the ego a little bit, because the ego is also what drives like our desires for things. It drives a lot of what we want to do in life, and it also is like part of our personality to some extent too. The ego is not all bad, and I feel like sometimes it gets a bad rep. I mean, didn't make it sound so good either, but we do need the ego to an extent in this lifetime, because some teachers, that go and do meditation retreats, or they become like a monk or something, like they completely dissolve the ego, or like that is their main goal, and they just want to sit and they want to be awareness, and they don't want to have any sort of anything sort of tainting like the essence of just pure awareness or consciousness, right? But the whole point of being this reality is to act in this character and to have fun and to enjoy the experience. So that's why I do think that the ego is okay. It's okay to have an ego. It's okay to want things. It's okay to have desires, because it gives our life meaning. It gives us purpose in this life. I don't know. That's just my perspective on it, because if you completely erase the ego, you also erase the majority of pretty much your entire personality as well. So that's why I always talk about working with the ego rather than against it. And what that means too is, once again, recognizing it's okay to have desires, it's okay to want things, and also a lot of our positive thoughts can come from the ego too. It can be like, wow, I look really good today, or wow, I don't know, I did really well on that assignment or something, or I'm really good at that one sport. Like the ego can also be very positive in certain ways. So you have to recognize when it's good and when it's not so good, and only listen to it when it's telling you positive things, basically. But regardless, I would say that, yeah, you don't have to dissolve the ego completely to manifest the things that you want in your life. And I actually think it's important to work with it rather than against it. So ignore it. Kind of don't give it the time of day when it's being very negative, when it's telling you all these things, but when it's being very positive, when it wants to, sort of uplift you in certain ways, then that's when you listen to the thoughts. That's when you do give the thoughts attention, or you do give them meaning, is when it's telling you all these positive things and you are telling yourself these positive things. That is where you always want to have your attention, is on the positive. And anytime it turns to negative, you don't get angry, you don't get upset with yourself that you're thinking negative thoughts. It doesn't mean anything. Means nothing. It just is another part of being human, and you just allow it to happen, allow the thoughts to pass through, don't attach any meaning to them. It just is what it is. Feel the feelings you gotta feel as well. If you're feeling sad or feeling angry, allow the feelings to come through. Feel them how you want to feel them, but in the entire time that you're going through that, still think in the back of your mind, like, this is okay. Like, I'm allowed to feel these things, and it doesn't affect where I'm going. It doesn't affect what I'm manifesting. It doesn't affect anything. They're just feelings. That's all they are. Like, don't give them bigger meaning than it has, basically. So hopefully this is making sense. I always say this in these videos, but like sometimes I just ramble and I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. By the end of the video, I'm like, what did we start the video on? But hopefully this topic is helpful to you guys, just because I know with me, with negative thoughts for a long time, I was so focused on just like, oh my God, I have to correct every negative thought. I can't think anything negative ever. And it just makes you crazy, and it makes you more anxious if you're trying to stop the anxious feelings or anxious thoughts. Like, I know when I used to get like this anxious feeling in my chest, it would just build up, and I would try so hard to just be like, I'm fine, I'm thinking positive right now, I'm thinking positive. And it would just get worse. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I'm trying so hard to focus on positive things. And that's when you just have to allow it. You just have to be like, okay, this is happening. It doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong. It's okay. It arose naturally. Like, just allow it to pass through, and it will. It will go away much faster if you just, like I said, in an argument, if you just look at it and be like, okay, yep, you want to do that? All right, sure. Just allow it to do its thing, whatever it wants to do. Allow it to kick and scream, and like a little kid, be annoying, be angry. Just let it do its tantrum thing, and then move past it. It's fine. So, anyways, hopefully this video is helpful in some way in regards to the ego. I do want to make more videos probably on this topic, just more about being in awareness and observing your thoughts, more on those sort of topics, like I said, non-duality. But once again, I just want to reiterate, you don't have to dissolve the ego to manifest. You don't have to do all these crazy things to manifest. You can manifest no matter what, as long as you believe that what you're doing is fine and you don't judge yourself for the negative stuff, for thinking negatively, feeling negatively. As long as, like I always say in all my videos, you continue to believe you're on the right path no matter what you think, no matter what happens in your life, no matter what you do, you're always on the right path. You're going exactly to where you want to go, as in, well, we know it's already happened. We trust that it's happened in imagination, therefore it must happen out here. It's just the law, it's guaranteed, it's a mirror. If you trust that, then you're good. You don't have to do anything special, anything more than that. Like, just try and keep it simple. But comment, like, and subscribe. If you are interested in coaching, that is in the description box below. And yeah, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one.